right. Okay, good morning. We are in the midst of the 17th session of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. More than 1,000 Indigenous representatives are here this week, and we are here with 3 Indigenous women who will speak about their work as human rights defenders. We have Anne Nuorgam, an expert member of the UN Permanent Forum. She's been a member of the Sami Parliament in Finland and is also the head of the Sami Council's Human Rights Unit. In the middle, we have Milka Chepkorir Kuto, a human rights activist and member of the Sengwer indigenous people who live in the Mbobut and Kabolet forest in Kenya. And for the last 3 years, Milka has been focusing on indigenous women and their role in defending land rights. And on the far side, we have Rani from the Chittagong Hill Tracts in Bangladesh. She is the advisor to the traditional indigenous institution, the Chakma Circle. So I think we'll start with Milka, maybe, in the middle, and please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm pleased for the second time to be taking part in the sessions of the United Nations Permanent Forum. And for the last 3 years, been working on the role of the Sengwer women in trying to fight for their land rights, for the community land rights, and also what these women and these children go through when they are evicted. So for the last 22 times, my community has been facing forceful evictions, which are characterized by burning of homes, burning of books, burning of clothes, and every other belonging, and arrests and harassment. And as soon as I finished my undergraduate, it just came into my mind that I need to look at what these women and children go through in these very uncomfortable circumstances. I live in Mbobut forest. We do not experience much evictions as in Mbobut. I come from Kabolet. And looking at that, traditionally, having recognized that women are not really taken into account when making decisions on land, I wrote a report on the experience of women and children and made proposals that, to the community and to the Council of Elders, which was initially made of only men, to consider having women being part of the decision-making processes, and also to be part of the teams that go out to the government, to the independent commissions, to any other forum to speak about what the community goes through. It's not been easy all this way. Most of the time, I personally have had to play hide and seek with the members of the Kenya Forest Service inside Mbobut Forest when I want to go listen to the women and the children and any other member of the community. And me and my other colleagues have been targeted by the government officials most of the time. But we've been able to speak out. The Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous People has been able to write about our community, about what we go through, and recommendations given last year to the Kenyan government to recognize our rights. It's not yet done, but we have hope. In as much as it is very difficult for us as a community, we still have hope that one day our rights to our community lands will be respected, and no more women will have to sleep in the cold, and no children and the elderly will have to die for being evicted from their ancestral home. Being Indigenous, I've always said, is not a mistake. It's not an accident. We were created and made Indigenous, and we live in the forests because our Creator put us there. So no matter how much we are going through now, as the Sengwer, we hope for the best, because our Constitution recognizes our rights to live in our ancestral land, as it is in the Article 63(2)(d)(2) of our Constitution. We have the international human rights mechanisms that protect us. We have UNDRIP, we have many other. And we believe that they are not just there. They are there because we are there as Indigenous people. And we hope that one day the government of Kenya will listen and respect its own constitution and respect the other laws to which they are treaties to, they are signatories to. Yes, so it's not been easy for myself, for my community, even now, as I am here, they are not okay. They are still facing evictions. One of my community members was unfortunately killed on the 16th by the Kenya Forest Service. And we're still facing all these threats every other day. But what personally I came to do here is to ask the Permanent Forum to especially address the international donor communities, because they are the ones who give funds to the government of Kenya and fail to really follow the human rights standards that guide them. So the EU, for example, is under which its project, our community member was wounded, another one was killed, and women and children have suffered a lot. And some of us have not been able to speak against what is happening. The Finnish government is currently funding the Kenya Forest Service, which again leads to supporting the Kenyan government to violate our rights. So if these international bodies can for a minute just stop and think through what their money is doing, then we will be safe as Indigenous communities in Kenya. Thank you.
Press yes?
You don't need to press. It's on.
Good morning. I'm Rani from Chittagong Hill Tracts, Bangladesh. The only region in Bangladesh that is militarized. We have 11 indigenous communities living in Chittagong Hill Tracts, and human rights violations in our region had been a long-standing issue. It had been going on for the last 50 years, even if we have a peace treaty that had been signed between the government and our regional political party group. 20 years ago, nothing much has changed. And we say that human rights violations prior to the peace accord, those been done quite overtly. You can see it. And now, during this last 20 years, it's been done covertly. So it's very difficult for you to see whether the violations are done. Who are the perpetrators? It's difficult to determine who the perpetrators are, because there have been long, different ways of well, let me put it this way, that our internal conflict had gone up, and there had been accusations from different sides that the state or the military has something to do with it. There had been strong accusations about it. Well, that's a short background, but today I'm here to talk about criminalization of indigenous human rights defenders, especially the indigenous women human rights defenders in Chittagong Hill Tracts and elsewhere in Bangladesh as well, because we have other indigenous peoples communities living in outside the Chittagong Hill Tracts region. Of course, we are all worried that our government, as well as in some other countries in Asia, the governments and the states have become more intolerant towards Indigenous peoples and Indigenous peoples' plight to ensure their rights. And criminalization is often the way the governments pursue to take, because it's the easiest way to repress Indigenous peoples. Including Bangladesh and some other countries in Asia, we have seen that the media has been repressed severely and the civic space has decreased. So we cannot make our voices heard. The media has been repressed. And you need to have public opinion. You need to generate public opinion. You need to build public opinion that Indigenous people's plight, it's not, they're not doing anything unlawful or illegal. What they're asking for is to have a dignified life, and they're to be treated as any citizen living in the country. But because the media had been suppressed and the media had been controlled by the government can sensitize public opinion and can legitimize their act of oppression towards Indigenous people. And here I want to bring in one of the experience I had working in a case that involved two Marma sisters, sisters belonging to a Marma community, one Indigenous community in my country, in my region, Seychelles region. One of the sisters, the elder one, who was raped by an army, member of an army, and her sister, younger sister, was sexually molested by another member of the patrolling group at their own home. So they traveled all the way from their remote village to the district hospital, looking for justice, of course. And us, human rights defenders, Indigenous women, we thought, yes, we have to support them, even if we know that there will be obstacles and it will be very, very difficult. But yet we have to give it a go, because it's a violation of rights, human rights. And at least they had the courage to travel all the way from remote village to the district. But long story short, it didn't actually work. We gave our best, but it didn't work. And I and one of the other Indigenous women human rights defenders who've been engaged in this case, we have been physically assaulted by members of the security forces. We've been threatened multiple times not to speak out, not to carry on with this case. And there had been press conferences by the non-Indigenous population living in the region, press conferences and rallies where they criminalized us, Indigenous rights defenders, they criminalized us, stating that we are not citizens of Bangladesh. We have just came from Myanmar, the neighboring country, because we don't look like non-Indigenous Bangladeshi people. And they wanted exemplary punishment for us. They demanded that from the government on the basis that they believe we are acting as traitors to the country. We are, that's the acts of treason against state. And even if we're organized politically, like political members of the regional political groups, they are being accused of not respecting the sovereignty of the state. And this is the common language that most of the governments use when they want to criminalize indigenous peoples. They use the sacred sovereignty, and they view us, or they want to portray us to the common public as, we do not want to respect the sovereignty and we want to break out and have our independent state. And that works. That works for the general public. The sentiment of the general public. So that's why we believe that the media needs to be free, and we need to have independent media or access to independent media where we can tell our stories and we can put our stories over there, and our voices heard. Our side of the story needs to be told. And that's why I think we're here.
Anne?
Thank you. I'm a Sami from Finland, northern part of Finland. And Sami people live in 4 countries, Sweden, Norway, Russia, and Finland. And we are about 100,000. And one people living in 4 countries, that creates challenges. But 3 of these countries, Finland, Sweden, and Norway, they have recognized us as indigenous people in their constitutions. And for example, the Finnish constitution, we are recognized as indigenous people who has right to develop our culture. And part of our culture, or our constitution recognizes, says that in the culture there are included livelihoods. And my background is that I'm fishing Sami, and I have brought up along the biggest salmon river in Europe, and Atlantic Salmon River. And I have fished all my life, since the childhood. Most of the Sami, of course, the Sami people are most known as reindeer herders, but there are other livelihoods among the Sami as well. And Nordic countries, they have the image of being very good with human rights. And they are, but mostly, of course, also in the Nordic countries, but especially abroad. And I'm happy to hear that what you said about that Finland is funding Kenya Forest Service. I'm going to take that issue up with the Finnish government. I doubt that they are not aware what's really happening there in the field. So please, but so the Nordic countries, they have difficulties to recognize the rights to the lands, territories, and natural resources of the Sami people. The one who has gone the farthest is the Norway, and Norway recognizes the rights of the Sami people to the lands, but not in Finland. And where I come from, that's the biggest salmon river. There is an agreement. I come from the border of Norway and Finland. And for that border river, salmon river, there is a fishing agreement between Finland and Norway. And that's the first agreement was already came into force 1873, and it was the first international agreement where the Sami customary use of or customary fishing was codified. And the agreement has been changed several times, and the last change was a couple years ago. And in that last change, the traditional fishing of Sami was reduced by 80%. And that's a severe threat for our culture, because by reducing our fishing rights, we cannot anymore pass the fishing to our younger generation. The traditional knowledge disappears. our culture is in danger because of that one. And and also at the same time, Finland changed its fishing act so that we are not anymore able to fish in the state lands where there is salmon, or state rivers, state waters where there is river. And that happened last year, 2017. So there were these two big changes concerning fishing. And us, 3 women, and one son of one of our women's group, we decided that we want to change the legislation. We had appealed to the government, to the parliament, to all possible ways, but no response. Because and the most typical response was that now we are reducing the fishing, your fishing, because we want to protect the nature. But so the rights of the indigenous peoples were put against the environmental rights, and we lost. And of course, behind that, all this protection was the idea that the salmon river should be opened more for recreational fishing, so all the Nordic, all the citizens of Finland and Norway can use, and all over Europe can use to take advantage of the river for recreational purposes. And that's not how we see the river. So we decided, 4 or 3 women, 2 besides me, that there is no other way than break the law. So what we did, we went fishing. We didn't buy licenses, and we went fishing, took photos, video, and then we had to announce ourselves to the police that we have committed a crime. So, and we also organized media campaigns and so on. So police had to question us, and the question was, do you have any proof that you have committed crime? Because we had to prove to the police that we had fished illegally, because this is one of the issues they don't want to raise. They don't want to have any kind of court cases on Sami fishing rights. Backwards thinking. But now this our case is now in the prosecutor's hand, but it has led to some effect, because the government of Finland and Ministry of Forestry started drafting new legislation on fishing to change the legislation so that we hoped that the change leads so that we get our fishing rights back. But we are not sure, because it's they have drafted, or they started preparing the drafting already 10 months ago. So, and we don't have the results. But we hope that this, our strategic litigation, if we ever get there, will lead to some results. And why us? Why it's 3 women and a minor? Because we decided that if it's the traditional way how the fishing is seen, it's the male profession, male livelihood. So, and I have to say that in my family, it is the women who fish as much as men. So this is way to get more attention to the case. And also that we are for, because if we lose all the levels in different courts in Finland, then we are aiming at different international courts and committees, treaty bodies. So that, but we hope that we don't need to go that far, that we get the results earlier in Finland. But our case has become, it's well known in the national news. We got the national coverage, and in that way that was our intention. And it has also led to the national discussion on the changing of the legislation. And so we hope that we can reach the result in near future. But if the legislation is not changed, then we have to go to the courts and defend our rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the speakers? Yes.
Hi, my name is Yapek. First, I want to thank your courage to be here. I'm so sad to ask this question, but as a journalist here at the United Nations, I have to. You guys came from far away to this building, and it's about 150 or more journalists exist in this building. They are occupying 2 floors. How you guys feel to come into an empty room to argue and to fight for your ideas? Thank you.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Thank you for the question, of course. Where I come from, I do not get a platform to speak. The only platform I get to speak is the social media, Facebook and Twitter. And most of the time it gets blocked because it's reported for violating community standard. So I get suspended for a few weeks, and I cannot reach to people, to public, and share the side of my story. So that's the situation in Bangladesh. I've been invited to a talk show at a national TV channel, and they asked me not to use specific words because the words are considered to be controversial. But without using those words, I cannot make a case. I cannot tell my stories. So it's no point for me going to a talk show and not being able to speak what I want to say. So when we come here, yes, it's not many journalists. Perhaps it's not in their priority list. But the fact that we can sit here and we can say things that we wanted to say, and we also know that it's been taped and it will be circulated, it gives out. It is empowering, and I think we shouldn't forget these experiences. It is empowering, and it will give us more motivation to do what we do. Thank you.
Milka.
In my country, we can speak more than her country. But the problem is, we've spoken. It's there in the Kenyan media. It's there in the international media. And for me and for us, we believe that it is not all about the number. So you could be few here, but you will take the message and someone else will see the interest tomorrow or the day before tomorrow. After tomorrow. And the number will keep increasing. A journey never starts in many steps. It starts with one. So if this is the first step, then this is what we are appreciating. That someone is there to listen. It's not an empty room per se. Someone will log in to the online UN web and see. The message will still get out. As I said before, it may look so frustrating now, but all Indigenous people have hope. I personally have hope that a change will come tomorrow. It will come the other day, next year. Yeah.
Next.
Sure, thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Inner City Press. On behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access, thanks a lot for coming here and doing this briefing. I had other questions, but in hearing the presentations, I couldn't help noticing Finland showing up in 2 of them. And I'm wondering, in the sense of, you said that Finland is funding the Kenyan Forest Service, and then you said that Finland has changed its laws so that to prevent fishing in state lands. To what degree does a conference like this allow groups? Can you work together on this? how does the Declaration of Indigenous Rights apply to the things the steps that Finland has taken? And I had one question about Bangladesh. It's ironic because these days Bangladesh is getting a lot of praise from the UN for its accepting Rohingya refugees, but it sounds like from what you're saying they're using the same arguments Myanmar is using, saying you're not really from here, or be quiet. And so I'm wondering, what do you make of that? Do you think that it makes it even more difficult to get your message out given the praise? And do you think, I've heard before in the Chittagong tracks that given what the military does, that maybe the UN should reconsider using Bangladesh soldiers as peacekeepers? It's a major profit center for the country. Do you think that there are practices of the Bangladesh military that should be considered more closely by the UN before the payments keep coming? Thanks a lot.
And you want to start on Finland?
Thank you. To answer both of your questions, I think that maybe the best use of this press conference is that I hear about her case, and then I can facilitate the meeting with the Finnish government in order to address the issue and see what can be done with it. And also the Sami Parliament in Finland, which I'm member of, can raise the issue with the Finnish development funders to see what can be done. And there is, as we all know, there is free press in Finland, and they are interested in these stories. That it's good that it gets across there. But it is very important that we address the donor countries in these situations. Maybe this is one of the best examples of indigenous to indigenous cooperation. Developed is practice there, and where we can help each other globally. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, there's a strong incentive from the Bangladesh military to send members of the military to the UN peacekeeping force. And what each human rights violations that have been perpetrated by the members of the military, we do not condemn the military. We condemn that particular person, that specific person of the institution. But we are always saddened to see that how military as an institution takes into account that that person is not a person. The person represents the institution, and they take it so personally. And it shouldn't be the case. There can be perpetrators, human rights violators anywhere in any institution, but the institution shouldn't be taking up the responsibility. And if they want to take up the responsibility, the best way to go is to take that perpetrator out of the institution, take them to the judicial court, and try it for the crimes committed. So, yes, even with this Marma Sisters case that I was involved in, they tried, the whole institution, the whole establishment tried to cover it up because perhaps, I don't know what the thought process is, but we can guess that they took it as a threat to the institution, the establishment, the army establishment, which shouldn't be the case. So, UN peacekeeping force, UN peacekeeping mission, Bangladesh had been sending quite a large number of members to the peacekeeping force. And we would like to urge, we have been requesting and urging that whoever is sent to the peacekeeping force, we should screen their human rights records within the country, because they are going to represent Bangladesh and they are going to establish peace in a foreign land. But they should establish peace within the boundaries, the borders of our nation before they set out to set up peace elsewhere. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, thank you for this briefing. I'm Amy Lieberman with DevEx, and I had two questions. One was for Ms. Rani first. You mentioned that the attacks and threats on human rights defenders you're seeing, they're getting worse in your area, and I'm wondering why you think that is and how that's kind of changing the response of your community to the threats. And then also for Ms. Milka, I was wondering about the steps you want to be taking right now in terms of approaching donors to Kenya, and how much of an influence you think that it really has when donors kind of are looking the other way when it comes to violations of human rights defenders for projects or organizations that they're supporting.
I think Finland is the fourth international donor that we are talking about now, because first we had World Bank with the Natural Resource Management Project, then came the EU, then came IUCN, then came the others. And why we started to start tackling them one-on-one is because we know that they have standards that they should respect. And why we also thought that we should be telling them is because in a way we felt that they have selective application of these standards. Because the EU, for example, and any other donor from Europe look so good when it comes to human rights protection and compliance. But when they go down to our governments, they comply with what the governments want to do. So we talked to the government several times, and we could not be heard. And so the only way, an example I would give is if you are in a pool and there's water inlet. If you want to empty this pool, you've tried to empty the pool by pouring the water out and the water is still coming in. The wisest solution is to go turn the tap off and then pour it out. And that's what we are doing with our government. Try to cut the link between them and the international donors by just telling them that you have to see that your money is not doing what it is supposed to do. The government of Kenya is using them for another reason. And so when they all realize that, then the government will be desperate enough to listen to us. And so the reason why we're taking the steps that we're taking now.
So the question was why the threats are growing for the indigenous human rights defenders. One of the things that first came to my mind is that the impunity that the perpetrators enjoy. Even if we are organizing politically, like we have regional political parties and the members of the political parties, there have been charges against them, false charges against them. They've been locked up. There have been enforced disappearances, and of course there have been lots of killings. Like last year, we have 14 indigenous women who had been killed. 14, if I'm not wrong. And none of the cases had ever come up, and we've never got justice for whatever happened to them. That's the first thing, the impunity, and the second thing is as I mentioned, the public opinion. It matters, because if we have a country, if we have a government, the government is doing certain things, and people are agreeing with it. People are not feeling that this has to be protested against. So we have this discourse of us versus others, non-Indigenous versus Indigenous. And Indigenous peoples have been looked down upon, that we have come from a different country and we don't belong in this country. So if anything, any human rights violations happens in Indigenous communities, it's difficult for us to mobilize non-Indigenous persons because they share the same values, they share the same perception as the state government does. So if there's no protest, government can always legitimize their act, and human rights violation cases just get unnoticed, and we never get justice for any of the violations. Sir here, he mentioned about Rohingya issue and Bangladesh having two different ways of dealing with indigenous issues, indigenous person from foreign country, indigenous person from my country. We, in general, indigenous peoples in my country, we really have strong faith in our Honourable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. But we believe that she hasn't been briefed properly on our issues because, it's the messages or the letters we have been sending to her. It takes layers and different agencies that passes through before it reaches to her. So I don't know. It's our belief, and we hope that if she had been briefed properly, she would have done something, and the situation would have been different.
Any more questions? Okay, last question.
I actually did have a straight-up Kenya question, which is it's kind of similar to what you just said. Do you find on your issues, I've been here covering the whole disputed election between Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. Does the NASOP, does the group of opposition, do they have a different position at all on this issue than the current government? And also, have you tried to reach out to the UN system in Kenya? I'm constantly referred to the resident coordinator there, Siddharth Chatterjee. Turns out to be the son-in-law of Ban Ki-moon, but that's another story. But I'm wondering have you tried, what's the UN's response in Kenya to indigenous issues? Thanks.
I have never heard from the resident coordinator himself addressing the indigenous issues, especially the Sengwer indigenous people's issue directly. But we've written to him not once, not twice, especially on the Red Plus project that UNDP Kenya is trying to roll out, because first World Bank tried to roll it out and they couldn't. And so they just gave it to UNDP to try it out. And because of the escalated evictions since December 25th, 2017, we wrote to him. And we asked him to suspend the UNDP process on Red Plus. He didn't write back. And of course, they've held the process. They're not going on with the UN Red processes. And now UNDP is convincing us as a community to write back to them, accepting or uplifting on our letter for suspension. But we've not done that, and we are not yet near or close to doing that, because we are still being evicted. And there are more than 100 armed Kenya Forest Service officers in our territories now. They've never withdrawn themselves, and UNDP is still pushing for a letter from us to lift the request for suspension. So that in itself tells that the resident coordinator, I don't know what he is thinking, but I've never heard him speak about that. About the opposition and the government, the politics in Kenya is too hot sometimes to deal with. This we would call a small issue for them. So we cannot really tell if the opposition would help in this, but the government itself is not anywhere close to willingness to help in this, because we went to court, we won a case. The court ordered that the evictions be stopped until the case is heard. So we have a kind of injunctive order from the Kenyan courts, but the Kenyan government has never respected it. We've had requests from the special rapporteur, from everywhere, but the Kenyan government is never had the requests. So the unwillingness, there's no political goodwill, so to speak. And so sad to say that in the recent past, ever since 2017 December, my community is termed as bandits. So they say we are security threat in the forest, because in the first place they said we are a threat to conservation, but that did not make it, because we could prove all the way that indigenous people actually are the best custodians of their forests, and we've done this even before the Kenya Forest Service came in. And recently they just say that we are bandits and we are a threat to the security, and they sent hundreds of armed forces to our land. That led to the killing of one of our own community members, and threats to activists like myself. So I've never gone to the forest for around, I think, 5 months now. I miss being there, but I can't be there. And a number of us cannot access there, and because we are being threatened. And so the banditry, it's a whole move or wave of criminalization of human rights defenders and indigenous people's rights, not only in Kenya, but I think it's just a global thing. I don't know what is happening.
We'll try to see whether the resident coordinator can at least answer. It's hard for us to know what he thinks, since he blocks Inner City Press on Twitter, but that's another story again. But keep it up.
Thank you to all the speakers. We have to end here. Thank you very much. And this was, in fact, webcast, so we will share the link.